Are you interested in a career in cybersecurity? Are you currently in law enforcement and looking to learn more about technology and cybersecurity? If so, please consider joining us for our master's degree in cybercrime and digital investigation from Michigan State University. Experience a nationally ranked program taught by world-renowned researchers like my two co-hosts on this show and practitioners that can help you play a role in combating cybercrime and advancing justice for victims. This is designed to be completed in as little as 2 years and in a flexible online format that works with your schedule. Visit cj.msu.edu to learn more. We hope you can join us. Welcome, everybody, to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. My name's Tom Holt. I'm a professor here in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University. I'm also the director for the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training. And I am here with my wonderful co-host, as always. Taylor, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Taylor Fisher. I'm an assistant professor here at MSU, and I'm an associate with the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training.
And I'm Dr. Rachel McNealey. I'm an assistant professor here at MSU and also an associate with the Cyber Center.
Now, usually we have on guests, we like to talk to people about their research, but we have been doing this podcast for a year now, which is amazing to me. I would have never in a million years thought that we would keep this project going as long as it has. It's been really, really nice. I've enjoyed this way more than I ever expected.
I would second that because I remember us having a conversation at the beginning of, we're all kind of awkward people. Like, what are we going to talk about? How are we going to do this? And I think we've all really come into our own.
I remember I was so nervous for our first one, even though it was Karen.
Yeah, and it's been so much fun getting to hang out with you both and talk to a lot of people and get to know more about this topic that I've been studying for a long time. And I feel like I've learned more doing this podcast than I have reading articles or stuff like that. I feel like I'm getting more of an insight into people's rationales and their overall thoughts and really getting a handle on this topic in ways that I haven't really been able to before.
I mean, because we get like undivided access to a scholar in this area, right? And functionally get to talk through it like a grad seminar, which you don't get to do once you're not in grad school anymore.
Right.
Just sit around and talk through things. So I really enjoyed that.
Tom, I'm interested in your thoughts because coming up in cyber, your experience obviously would be very different from ours. I've heard from other people that, cyber used to be its own kind of specialty and its own kind of thing. And so if you specialized in cyber, that was your specialty. But I don't know about you guys, this podcast has made me realize you can't do that anymore. There's way too much in this cyber world. So I'm interested in your thoughts on kind of how the cyber world has expanded and, how this podcast has kind of exposed that to us.
Yeah. Because when I started, I want to do everything, and there were people just doing little dribs and drabs, which is great. But now, it seems like you can specialize in fraud, and that's all I do is fraud. Or, I study hacking, and that's it, and sex offenses and everything else. So it is very, very narrow now, and not in a bad way. You can certainly be a generalist, but it's very different from when I started. And yes, I am a very old man.
That is,
everyone
I
has
chose
said.
my words carefully.
I was thinking, Tom keeps calling you old.
No, the word age bracket came into my brain, but I didn't say it, so I don't want to be held down to that.
Yeah, I know I'm older than Rutger Lickfeld. I don't look it, but I am older. Yes.
That beard, you can't beat. It's just there. Oh, that's so funny.
Well, what about you all? What's been the experience so far?
I mean, I think more and more I'm continually baffled by the fact that cyber is still separated from quote-unquote mainstream criminology, despite all of these overlaps that we keep returning to. Because I think a theme that keeps coming through is it's a lot of the same stuff. It's done a different way, but it's a lot of the same. And it's explanations in the behaviors and the root of the behaviors. I think every single person we've talked to has said that in some way or another. And so it feels like it's a fight we don't really have to fight anymore. But then again, you look at the field and it's still very segmented. And whether that's a data issue, right? We don't have data that are as trusted at this point as some of the more, historic offending victimization samples or methods to sample that don't really work for cyber. So I don't know, but it's something I've been paying attention to and wondering how we can elevate that conversation to people who can do something about it. Because clearly I think we're all on the same page.
Yeah, no, I think what's really come out of this for me is how many different approaches can be taken to cybercrime in terms of methodologies, in terms of data collection, right? We've talked to people that do really high-tech stuff right? Literally writing algorithms. And then we have people who are focused entirely on behavior. And I think, if anything that's come from this, it's really reinforced that idea that we need both. We need to be able to understand what tech can do, what its capabilities are, but then also what are people doing with it, right? To your point of, this is just a new tool. And I think because it's so big and scary to a lot of people, it gets put in that cabinet. But really, it's just a hammer, a knife, a screwdriver, right? It's a tool that's being used. And so I think what comes to my mind in that conversation is, we struggle in cyber to come to clear definitions of what is cyber, what is cyber adjacent, what is cyber facilitated. And we have all these different terms going around, but in reality, it's just the same crime types with different tools. And so, I think that big, wide, scary bunch of computer crimes is hard to tackle when you don't understand the computers and the tech. But I think if anything, we've shown that behavior plays just as important a role as the tech side does.
I think it's reaffirmed for me as well a pre-existing notion that I had that graduate students need more exposure to what I would call digital criminology, right? How technology interacts with and changes behavior, because it truly is in everything. You cannot look at any part, I think, of criminology anymore without accounting in some way, whether it's a control variable or a structural characteristic, for technology.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to be doing a better job of attending to that.
Absolutely.
When I got started, which was forever ago.
Now you're reinforcing it. I just want to be clear on that.
The idea of studying cyber was so foreign, and I was at a place that was very street crime oriented, qualitative, some quant folks, but certainly more of that kind of, we interview offenders, that's how we understand crime. You could not have been more of a sore thumb to say, I'm going to study cybercrime by looking at forums and talking to some hackers. And so now it is nice, and I agree with you completely. It seems like we need more of that as an emphasis among graduate students, especially to understand, no, you can get stuff from the internet that's going to inform your understanding of whatever crime type you're interested in, or how police are utilizing technology in different ways and what the impacts are. So it would benefit everyone to have a little more exposure, but I don't know that we're at that point yet, which is a shame.
I would even extend that further and say, from our experience training law enforcement, when we ask them, how many of you guys have had a mobile device? Most hands go up, Unfortunately, the next biggest one is CSAM, right? The child abuse materials. But, these are things that our law enforcement are coming across. It's not that we're just talking about them in the ethereal, ivory tower, right? It's important for us as grad students to know those things, but it's also important that our law enforcement knows these things, right? And recognizes that crime is still the same thing, right? We're still trying to accomplish gaining money or hurting somebody, but how we're going about it looks very different. And I think being in here, right, and being able to talk to scholars, it's really highlighted how important the practitioner's voice is in all of this. And that's something that, we've been able to really accomplish with our training and getting to talk to those people. But I don't know how you guys kind of see the combination of how our trainings and our podcasts go, but that's kind of where I've seen it sit, right? I'm getting from both sides of the coin that this is something that we need to focus on.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. And I suppose for listeners or viewers who aren't familiar with our other non-podcast work, we provide cost-free training to law enforcement in the state of Michigan to improve their cybercrime responses. And cybercrime response is a wide range of possible things, but really starting from the ground up in terms of understanding what types of crime are on the books to begin with, the types of evidence that go along with those, and considerations for investigations. Because across the board, this is something that our colleague Cooper Maher studies, across the board there's very little specific cybercrime training, particularly at the academy level. And so for a lot of them, unless they've received kind of trial by fire, on the job knowledge about cybercrime, this is the first formal, training that they're receiving on it. So that's what we do in our spare time. And we've been doing that for about a year as well, so it kind of maps on here. But I think for me, it's really cemented the value of the academic practitioner bridge and relationships. That's something that I hadn't really worked in a lot before I came here. And I was I'm sure you all will recall, I was very self-conscious about the fact that we weren't police. And I was very afraid of, coming in as, hello, I'm Dr. Rachel McNealey, and I'm going to tell you how to do your job. And it hasn't gone over like that at all for the most part. They're really, open to gleaning as much as they can. And so I think that's been really encouraging,
Mm-hmm.
right? The problem is very, very big, but there's value in incremental, small efforts.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So we've had a lot of guests on from international places too, which I think helps because it's good to see in those different contexts how the Dutch are doing something or why African conditions in Nigeria or Ghana are going to affect people in the United States. And so I feel like that's really helpful to get some of that reminder that local and global are all connecting together at the same time. And it's hard to necessarily articulate that all the time, but I feel like a lot of our guests have done that for us, which is nice.
I would second that for sure, because a theme that I noticed was how laws in the U.S. can only go so far when it comes to cybercrime, right? It really is dependent on how the networks are set up, how these, proxy servers are working, and how all of the kind of crime script aspect of cybercrime goes into this kind of understanding. Without knowing what other countries are doing, without knowing what other regions are doing, we're not going to be able to address it. We're not going to be able to handle it. And so I think one goal that I would like to see of the cybercrime world, if they'll listen to me, is, getting better cooperation across those country borders, because we're not seeing... I mean, there are good efforts. I don't want to, downplay that. There are good efforts being done, but I think we need to improve how we globally address these things, because we're so intertwined at this point. That's not going backwards, right? That's not going to go back. We're not going to have a U.S.-only internet. That's not going to be realistic for us. And so I think that's something that I'd really like to see push forward, right, is being able to better kind of bridge that gap across where policy doesn't, right, or can't, maybe.
No, and paradoxically, I think cybercrime is exceptionally global in that way, and then also very local in a lot of ways. And it makes the work hard to address in a wholesale way, because how do you reconcile those two massive contexts? But I think that's why I'm so excited we have so many people now in this area here at MSU and more elsewhere as well, because we have enough people to attend to kind of all of those layers and tie all of them together. So,
Have you guys had a favorite episode? I mean, all of them are good, but do you have one that especially stands out for you?
I think there's two that stand out for me. I don't know if I can pick a favorite. The first one that really stands out to me is Dr. Fisk, because his just kind of take on academia and how our world works, it was very different from most people. And I really liked the way he approaches education and the way he tries to be that person to bring tech into the lives of kids before they're developing these processes and procedures for how they interact with people, right? He wants it to be a pro-social thing, so I really enjoyed that. And the second one was pet scams. I learned so much about pet scams, and I am a new dog mom, and I'm telling you, if somebody set me up that way, I would harm them. I would be so upset if I could identify them and find them and get to them. But I think that one was one of those this is moving quickly, right? Cybercrime is evolving. They're finding all sorts of ways to go about frauds, and I think that one really stood out to me as well.
yeah. I always think of Nate Fisk's episode as well, just for when he was talking about when your kids watch Marvel, that's Disney putting their nostalgia hooks in your child. I always think of that just in terms of the economy of entertainment, and it was such a broad view of entertainment that was so interesting to hear about. But I think my favorite personally is one that will have just come out before this one drops, which is Brandon Vanderhyde here at MSU, because I think it's easy to look at the internet and think about tech and cyber as a very, cold kind of space that has to do with coding and networks and infrastructure, whatever. But he was solely talking about presentation of people. How do you as an individual present on this online medium? And I think that brings a really behavioral and human-based perspective, to this area that is currently dominated by cybersecurity, if we're being completely honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
In terms of, attention and funding, I think. But I think that's the piece that makes cyber criminology unique.
Yeah.
So that's mine. What about you, Tom?
We've had so many fun ones, and I would encourage you, if you're a listener and haven't gone back, listen to the back catalog, because there are some really fun episodes, especially early on. I've enjoyed just like our casual conversations that we started the year with around gaming and movies and stuff like that, because it was nice to just take a step back from the more researchy part of this and just talk casually about how all this stuff fits in with what we know and what we don't know. I also really enjoyed our discussion with Rebecca Taylor from Sophos. I thought that was really nice to get that practitioner perspective, because we haven't had that many practitioners on, and so it was helpful to get a little bit more of that context, which was nice. The pet scam stuff was great. I thought our interview with Suleiman Lazarus was really instructive, just to understand some more of those geographic dynamics. But everyone's been really good. There's a lot of good things to say, which is nice.
It's just fun. The breadth of people we've gotten the chance to talk to, and I know I've said this probably on camera, but also off camera a lot. It's just the names that we've gotten to sit down and talk to that we were reading in like undergrad or the early days of studying cybercrime. Like, if you told me in undergrad that I was going to casually record a conversational podcast with Rooker Lookfeld, I think you're lying. That's absolutely bonkers. And I appreciate the opportunity most of all, and the time from all the people who've spent it with us.
I would certainly second that. I think we benefit a lot from Tom's network here, that he's been able to, really network out and be a real pin in this world. But mine in that regard was Steinmetz. I thinking about his textbooks and things that we've used for years, and then having such a normal conversation with him was so strange. And I think his take on kind of the sociological side of crime and kind of this digital world that we have on is so interesting. But to the same theme, right? I would have never imagined a world where he now considers me in his network.
Well, that plus you're telling me my co-host is Tom Holt. That's bonkers. And you roll your eyes, but it's so true. It's very I have
true.
Non-cyber friends from grad school who know who you are because like your work just pops up so often.
Well, I feel like I dragged you two along into this, so I appreciate that you're willing to do it and take the time to do it, because that really is the thing, right? It's a long time to sit down and talk to people and take the time out of the day, especially if you're not much of a talker, so I totally understand.
Thank God you're a nice guy and have so many friends. We get to benefit from it.
Right. Well, and I think we were talking beforehand about, some of our best episodes. Your wife's episode did fantastically.
She was good,
I think there's a real power couple going on here. For our listeners that don't know, these two, they're really head in the game here. And I'm really happy to be here.
Well, so we haven't talked about ourselves very much, so who wants to start?
I want to start with you, Tom. I'll start as the questioner, but I want to put you on the spot. Welcome. This is our guest, Dr. Thomas J. Holt. Thomas.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Or as recently known on his ACJS Mentor Award, Toman.
That is really something.
There's a little typo situation with his most recent award, but an award is an award, a plaque is a plaque.
He gets so many, there was going to be an error eventually.
That's the first award that I've gotten from a major organization. So it was very nice, but also, wow, my name is immediately wrong.
So I know you got the award, but I don't remember what the award was. What was the...
For mentoring various people throughout their careers.
Oh, yeah, obviously. We'll put you at the top of the list. For sure. No, I mean, I would second what Rachel's saying. I think, going through grad school especially, I didn't get to cyber until a little later. I don't know if we've talked about this, but Rachel and I went to our masters together pretty
Roll
much.
Tide.
Yeah, Roll Tide, Alabama. But and when we did so, she was fully on cyber and I was really more in the policing world, and we didn't work a lot together. And then going through going through our PhDs in two different places, we both kind of came back to the same spot.
I remember being like, Taylor's doing cyber now? What happened? And then they're like, I went full scale, CS, digital forensics, and I was like, awesome, let's go.
Yeah, I think, reading about cyber and kind of to my earlier point, we never really thought that there'd be different ways to go about it, but we both have kind of taken a different approach, right? You're a little bit more behavioral and kind of geographical perspectives, and I definitely lean technical, but, from your experience of, really pioneering this field, did you ever imagine that people could be so different, but within the same kind of subfield?
Sort of. I just didn't realize how much things were going to change so quickly. Like when I started, it's all on forums or IRC, and there's a lot more interpersonal interaction offline. And so to see it become, no, it's social media and it's gaming and it's all of these things at the same time. I remember reading a book by this guy Thomas Rid in like 2013 saying that it was basically this argument about cyber warfare, which I didn't agree with, but his main conclusion was that the world is going to fragment so much that we won't be able to have the same conversations about the same thing, and that it's going to splinter ideologies and belief systems and things like that to where you're going to have fringes of fringes of fringes. And I thought that's really interesting, and sure enough, it's absolutely right. I mean, your experience of the world online is dependent on what hubs you're in and what weird sites you go to and how much your online-ness matters. So it strikes me that if you would have told young me in 2005, you're going to wind up talking about AI way more than you ever expected. It would be like, do you mean like video game AI? Because that's the AI I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think you kind of alluded to it before in that you related to a lot of our guests and how they started in cybercrime because of their interest in computers. But what was it for you specifically?
So, like, I liked video games when I was a kid. So, I was born in 1978, which, just to give some context for my age, the computer.
Century?
I know, and it feels like talking about.
You're telling me there's a 1 at the beginning of your birth year?
You.
I'm 95. So.
Let's go down there.
Yeah, but I mean, it might as well have been the Stone Age in terms of technology. So, arcade games and stuff like that were really cool, and Nintendo was cool. And I remember going online for the first time in like 1993 or 94, maybe.
To be honest, Tom, that was the year I was born. Sorry, Tom, I just had to say it.
So that was when I started high school.
So sorry.
And see, this is also the thing, right? Because contextually, the way that I'm going to understand things is so dramatically different from your experiences and my kids' experiences. And so it's good, in my mind, too, to have these discussions with everybody, because there's so much stuff that I'm not going to either functionally understand or won't have the time to understand, or I'll be getting in right at the peak end of something. And so what's the point in knowing how this works if nobody's using this platform anymore? So it's helpful to have all of these conversations, and I feel way more rejuvenated as a scholar in my old age working with you both than I have in a very long time.
Aww.
Like coming out of code, it was like, I'm really done with this. And
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
it's like, oh no, this is awesome. I'm totally back in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I like that.
That makes me feel good.
Yeah. I'll take that ego boost.
Yeah.
So you brought up an interesting theme that I think has come up quite a bit, and I want to ask you because you're the only parent in the room. Sorry. Just to bring attention to it. I'm really struggling this episode, guys. But we
know
are
I'm
Tanner
90.
not call Tom old challenge.
we're gonna start making bingo cards. But parenting has come up a lot. I don't know about you guys, but I never thought we'd have
Yes.
as many conversations about what it's like to be a parent in today's world. And I think that's something that really could resonate well with listeners of, you know, how do I approach parenting in this world where my kid might know more about this tech than I do? And that's a really scary thing because we've come up with phones, computers, right? It's kind of part of our life. But to someone that, you know, didn't grow up with that or doesn't want to have that in their life, being a parent has a very interesting role. And so I think that's something that has come up more than I would have expected.
1,000%. But I think it's because it's a cross section of everything, right? Because the problems that we're seeing, particularly interpersonal forms of cybercrime, I think are, if not directly, maybe indirectly related to how people are being taught to use technology and the purposes for it and the purposes it serves in your relationships with other people.
Yes.
Right? You used to have to call someone's landline at their home and see if they're going to pick up. If they don't, you leave a voicemail, whatever. You don't call them 62 times in a row. And now when you receive a text, maybe I should speak for myself here, but it feels like an expectation of at least prompt response in that regard. So the way that we've communicated, I think, using technology has changed a lot as well, which thereby changes your relationships with other people. So that alone it has to have like wildly changed so many things and how you interact with people.
Oh yeah, and just the technology itself is really surprising. Like, I remember playing games on my mom's computer back in the 80s when it was, the gigantic floppy disks.
Yeah.
And now
Playing Pong.
It wasn't me.
I'll have you know it was the Punisher and Captain America. Thank you. I was a good 80s boy who was a nerd and read comic books and bought them from Electronics Boutique at the mall.
I love that.
But then it was like when I was in college, it was harder 3x5 floppies, and then it was, you are all probably too young to remember these, but zip disks that were like fat, weird, hard-ish floppy disks, but they were like 32 megs. So it was
The ones that
big
were like an inch
storage.
thick almost?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I know. I always thought they were like a form of a cassette tape, if I'm being honest, but that's on me. That's on
More
me.
like a cartridge.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So that was like the 2000s, and then it was flash drives, and then it was CDs and DVDs, and now it's cloud storage. So it's just all those changes. Where am I going with this? All of these changes that you adapt to, but then there's all the other things that you don't adapt to or you don't use. And so that's part of the complicating experience of parenthood, at least from my perspective. Like, I had young parents who, my mom was an accountant basically and had a computer, but it was all work-based. And to talk about technology, they weren't online. They had an internet connection, but they weren't really using it. And so to talk to them relative to my experience, now to talk to you all or to talk to my kids, it's just so dramatically different, and the lived experiences are going to make things so different that I don't know how we're going to have certain discussions when, like, my oldest knows AI more than I do, and she will be genuinely excited if she sees me using AI. Like, I was...
Good job, Dad.
I know. I was using it the other day to run a script for data collection, and she walked by. She's like, "Oh, you're using AI? What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing data scraping." Oh, and then she couldn't care less.
You're not making comic books?
No, exactly. Yeah, I'm not making music. I'm not doing anything fun with it. So
Do you think in a way that's because it legitimizes her using it?
maybe that's a good question. I don't know. I should have asked more in the moment. That's the one
That's an
thing.
interesting thing, yeah.
Yeah. That's the one challenge, I guess, for people who are parents, is trying to have those discussions, because there are times when they will tell you way more than you will ever be able to understand, or at least you can get context for why they're using it, but then, okay, why would I do this, though? Like, I still don't use Snapchat. I don't get it. I would just as soon send you the text. That's so much easier. I don't get it. But that's a personal problem more so than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's more of an artifact of it having just come out, I think, when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Everyone signed up, everyone had it. I had, like, free reign kind of over my own device at that point, but was a goody two-shoes, so wasn't doing anything bad anyways. And just, like, started my Snapchat then and have had it the entire time since.
Yeah.
And I do have friend groups that still use it, but I know it's not, the mode of communication anymore. But, hey, send me all the pictures of your pets on Snapchat.
No,
I don't care.
for real, yeah. That's literally it. It's just
Yeah.
people sending dog pics back and forth, but...
Yeah, pretty much.
I know I have had a LinkedIn account since 2009, and only because when I started here, MSU was like, you should have a LinkedIn account. But I don't know why I need this, but okay. And now I use it all the time, but it took almost 20 years to finally be like, oh, this is why I would
I
use
get
it.
it. Yeah. That's...
No, 100%. But even with all the things that have changed, like we're talking about, I find that reading early work in the cybercrime space, we're talking about the same things. And I've said this before on here, but it's what I keep returning to across every area of cyber. Not that social science ever really comes to a conclusion on any major question, but I don't think we have come to a single consensus as a field in all of this time, other than routine activities can be applied to cyber. Which, that's a good thing to know. It's a good place to start. But I think the pace of technology changing can be really daunting, especially for me it was as an early career researcher. I was like, I don't have the tech skills to keep up with this part of it. But the reality is, I think the fundamental behaviors remain pretty static as they go, right? Because it's just different modes to interact with the same basic human, patterns and psychology that we have always had. So I think in that way, it's also really cool. But reading work from like the early 2000s, it's fundamental questions that we don't know yet. And now we're at the point where we're talking about agentic AI, and we still don't know, like, is crime online, what is it, new wine in old bottles? Like that. Has that question been fundamentally answered at this point?
I'm glad that we're not having those debates anymore, because that, to me, and I don't know if it's an ADHD problem or what, but I would read those things and be like, okay, great. What do we do with this?
Right.
Why does it matter what it is? Let's look at the actual problems. Personally, I struggle with any kind of researcher-defined crime type or umbrella categorizations, because at the end of the day, all that means is I'm going to be fighting with you over why you aren't using my idea, as opposed to let's just study the crime type. But it is kind of interesting, because when I got started, I was doing a lot of subcultural work, and now I've been looking recently to find more subcultural work, and it seems like it's almost disappeared. And I don't know why that is.
I saw your LinkedIn post about that.
See, LinkedIn, there we go. But it's a good question, right? Because if we now have all these different platforms of experience, is it reasonable to argue that a subculture of violence will look differently on YouTube or on TikTok or whatever the case might be by virtue of the limitations of the platform or the use case for the platform? And so that to me seems like, no, we need more work and more understanding of this phenomena, but we've abandoned it in favor of network analysis or social relationships.
See, that's interesting. So I was just going to say, I think the networking kind of exemplifies what you're saying, because I know with subcultures and like hacking groups, they always point you to their Telegram, right? It's never, let's talk on Snapchat, let's talk on Twitter. It's, hey, let's get in the Telegram chat, because they know Telegram's not going to shut down their channel if they're talking about bad stuff. And so when you were speaking about that, I was thinking the platform itself has really become an example of what the behavior will look like based on what are they enforcing? Do they enforce? Do they even care about it? Maybe they created it for criminal purposes. I'm talking in darknet. Like, the platforms themselves, now we have options of platforms. If I want to talk to people, I can do it on Instagram, not Facebook. And so what is the use case of using Facebook over Instagram? Probably not very different, but I know that I'm going to be fed different information. The algorithm's going to look very different, right? You throw Twitter in there, it's going to look even worse,
Yeah.
And so, to that thought, like looking at how culture develops online, whether it be mainstream culture or subculture, now we have the idea that which platform you choose is going to play a role. And that's something that I think is crazy, because we don't know what platforms are out there. I keep thinking about the, what was the messaging app that came out of China that everyone got on for like a day and a half? Was it WeChat?
Or is that what WhatsApp used to be called?
I don't know. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was something similar to TikTok.
Oh, yeah. Was it Red
about?
something?
Yes, that sounds familiar. And so that was really an interesting thing, because now we were getting kind of a snapshot of what life looks like in China because we were using their platform. And so that was a really interesting point in time where I recognized not only your access to the internet can be restricted, but the platforms you're choosing to access it on play a role as well.
So thinking about subcultures, though, and I'm about to get real sociological, so
Yeah.
pardon me on this. Do you think that perhaps it's because of a fundamental data problem in trying to examine online subcultures? Because when I reflect back to our week on subcultural theory in my graduate theory seminar, I think that a lot of, based on like tenets of symbolic interactionism, a lot of culture is defined by the positionality of the individuals engaging in it, right? And that doesn't really exist in the same way online. You can't essentially take one person typing something into a Discord and say, well, this person is coming from this kind of, background demographic framework to contribute to this culture, which is then continuing on. To me, when I look at forums, I just see lines of words, and not people, quite
Yeah.
frankly. Also because I personally think there's a fundamental problem of attribution. When you're looking at forum data, you can't say with any certainty that one individual is truly one individual.
Of course.
But how would you endeavor to look at it despite that?
My take has always been to look at the richness of the information being provided. And I have had some studies that I think are really impactful for my perception of what they're talking about and why they're talking about it. So, like, I've done studies of sex work and specifically street level prostitution and human interactions offline, but they're talking about it online. And there's value in the way that individuals are communicating with one another, and they're stressing this makes for good content, and we are going to upvote, or we're going to support this post because it's informative and it gives us detail on how I can do this, who I can contact, what I can do. And so I tend to think of it not as a bunch of just lines of text. It is certainly lines of text, and the attribution issue is always a problem. But even if it were 5 people posting in 50 different user accounts, there's something distinctive about the way that they're communicating with one another. And so I've always tended to look at the way that they're placing value based on either the amount of feedback or the engagement with the posts. And so that's how I would tend to do it. I would love to go back and do some more work. This is going to sound very strange, but there's a lot of sex tourism in the world. And so there are very dedicated forums for various places like Thailand and the Philippines where there's a lot of sex tourism. And the discussions there are extremely intimate in terms of go to this bar, ask for this person, here's how you can communicate if you don't speak the language, use this taxi company, use this vendor, and I will be here because it's expat night at this place. And all of us are going to go out together. And so that's the kind of stuff that I think is really interesting, because it goes from just this abstract set of discussions to more like, you can Google and you can see this is a real bar, and this is a real place, and this is a real provider. And so then it puts a little more tangible impact, I guess. Whereas, like, if you're just looking at hackers talking about hacking, boy, that can make your eyes glaze over. Or illicit markets. That's the one thing that I've struggled with a lot. Like, I did a lot of work on illicit markets in the 2010s, and I got burned out on it a little bit because there's only so many ways you can look at the same set of ads for a different product before you're like, the process is all the same. This is just, I'm just trying to reinvent the wheel and it's not going to work. So I tend not to worry about the attribution point unless we're talking about something like, say, hacking tools where, okay, so one person claims to have made this tool, but they're selling it on behalf of another person. Why aren't these the same people? And so then you can do a lot more of that unpacking. But yeah, data is never the problem. It's the analysis that I think is the problem.
So basically, differential engagement as culture, basically. Like, I think of Reddit, like subreddits, where someone will come with a stupid question, and it's a question that this particular group of people has heard a million times, and they'll all downvote them to hell because they're like, no, don't come in here with that bullshit.
We've already had this discussion.
Right, it's in the rules on the side. Go read the rules. You're not allowed to ask that question, and they all downvote them. So kind of that collective, like, engagement with online content. Interesting.
A thing that kind of came to my mind while you were talking about that is, and we've talked about this a number of times, is kind of identity formation in online spaces and how different it is now because kids have devices from the time that they're learning to talk, and so the way that they learn to communicate is through devices. And even in situations where children are nonverbal, they use devices to communicate. And so I've been thinking, how can we better prepare our young people to use this technology in a way that is beneficial, right? We can't deny that tech makes us more efficient in very meaningful ways, but we've all kind of grown up without it to an extent that our identity was formed in real life experiences, like you were talking about with sociological perspectives. But now that's not the reality anymore. And so when I'm reading people's posts, I have to then think, am I attributing this to that person that I know in real life, or is this kind of this world that they put on for the internet?
Their online persona.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something that I'd really like to dive into in the future, is the idea of like influencers and content creation, and how identity formation is so warped in those contexts because I'm sure I've brought it up to you guys before, but there's some really good documentaries that have come out recently, and of course their names are escaping me right now, but about how content creation kind of groups, how they grow up and how they force kids into fake relationships, and it's all for content, it's all for creation, and it's housed in this world of, well, we're making money, so it's okay. And so
it's self-produced reality TV.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. Yeah, and so I keep coming back to, we don't have any formal education at the K-12 level, right? There are schools that do it, but it's certainly not a requirement, right?
On digital literacy.
Yeah. Specifically on digital literacy, but they're being given devices. I mean, we've talked before, your kids have tablets, right? Or Chromebooks. Or both, maybe.
Both, unfortunately.
And so we're giving them this tech to say, hey, here, use this, but we know they're using it for other things. We know they're using it for AI use or whatever it is they're doing. And so if we don't have that piece that we teach them, hey, you are yourself outside of this entity, right? You have to be able to develop your own sense of self, because how confusing would it be if you're constantly getting feedback on things that should be developing your personality, right? If people were telling me, hey, that's weird, don't do that, when I was 12, I may be a very different person, Like, I think about, I hate getting feedback in online spaces because it feels so impersonal. But if that's all you grow up with, that's all you know, like, that's crazy to me. And I think as criminologists, we really have not paid much attention to that world, in my opinion.
Like how it's influencing behaviors.
And how it's becoming normalized, right? It's so normal that if I find content from a certain type of person, right, I recognize them as being part of this crew, well then I know that that's just slop, right? That's just stuff that they're trying to put out there to get the numbers. But if I see someone that's, I don't know, recipe giver, cook, they bake in front of the I was about to say that stuff, right? But people that bake for their TikTok channel, I approach that very differently, because I would trust that your recipe is going to work, but if I'm watching a bunch of 12-year-olds try to bake a cake, I'm not going to go to that for information about how to bake a cake, right? Because it's just for entertainment. And so the way we're thinking about it, and I can't imagine raising a child right now, but the idea that they're not getting that pro-social education side of it, but they're being given it. And so how are they developing it? Earlier you made a comment about what they're being taught, and I just kept thinking, I don't even think they're being taught. I think they're learning from experience and from other people, but nobody ever sat them down to say, hey, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a reflection, too, of a generational difference in how we use social media. I think that older content creators, I mean, not even as a rule, though, I would say content creators that strive for more authenticity, I think that type of content was born from people who turn to social media as a way to go, look, there are other people who have these same concerns, these same health problems, mental problems. They see the world the same way, and it gives me a little bit of like validation of who I am. Right? I know that that's how I feel often with some content creators, and then I find myself questioning their authenticity, and I'm like, Rachel, this is content. Like, not that I'm about to develop a parasocial attachment, but even just getting validation from it, I'm like, you don't know that person. Because I've been poisoned now.
It's that rat poison.
Yeah.
That to me is one of the most interesting parts too, because there's now simultaneously a monoculture and myriad subcultures. So around the world, everybody knows what 6'7" is, whether you're
6'7".
Exactly. And what the hell it means, I don't know, but everybody knows
tell
it.
You, but I know it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you have that shoots through entire generations, entire places, but then you also have, and I'll out myself, weird subcultures around things like G.I. Joe was a toy when I was a kid, and there are grown men older than me who have entire YouTube channels, and shout out to HCC 788.
Hey!
Love to have you on the show if you're willing. And their entire presentation is also about this very niche thing. But to your point, they are very authentic about themselves. It's not necessarily highly polished. They will often give way too much information about themselves, but it gives you that connection, and it drives these very interesting subcultures around essentially a toy, but there are still questions of authenticity about that person's presentation of this content. So it's just so odd how we have these simultaneous competing dynamics of a global monoculture, but very, very teensy-weensy subcultures within that are very niche and very specific. And so I don't know how all that can sustain itself. But.
I would take that even a step further and think about it from the criminal perspective, right? Those criminal subcultures are there too. And they're finding people that say, hey, hacking is okay. Hey, you know, defacing that website, perfectly fine. Do that. You know, or hey, create that deep fake of that person. She deserved it. Right? And so you think about how we, as hopefully pro-social people, right, on social media, can look at it and say, okay, I believe this, I don't believe this, I feel like I'm part of this community. But to think that I have some kind of inclination to commit a crime and then I find a community that says, do it, right? Like, that's a really scary thing. And I think about the dark net a lot in that regard because it is kind of the Wild West. But, I mean, these are forums that exist on ClearNet too. Telegram is a huge platform for this. WhatsApp has a huge platform for this. And so, you know, I keep thinking, how do we rectify that? How do we deal with the fact that we want people to be able to find community, we want people to be able to network, but that means exposing them to things that could be harmful as well. And again, could not be a parent right now. That would be absolutely incredible to try to manage. I can't imagine.
So, Taman, Timothy, in your long career, you looked at many different things, and you kind of touched on what you would want to do more of. But where do you see the field going, I suppose, or what problems do you think are left that we really need to prioritize?
I think we need more understanding of the dynamic developmental milestones related to cybercrime, because we know the age crime curve when we talk about traditional crime. We know the application of things like whether it's Sampson and Laub's model or Moffat and Associates kind of was it life course persistent versus adolescent limited frameworks for traditional crime, but nobody's really done that yet for cyber. There's dribs and drabs of it, but there's not a good uniform, because it's hard to do and it costs a ton of money and the data's hard to develop. But that's something that we need. I think we need more understanding of AI because of the potential impacts for AI to all the aspects of cyber. And then more generally, I would love to see better policing research because everybody's doing it differently, and the U.S. is such a big country with so many different policing resources and tools. One of our colleagues, Julie Krupa, who's a juvenile justice scholar, has done some really good legwork to get us into understanding how juvenile probation may be changing as a function of technology. So there's a lot more things that we need to understand that we haven't really addressed. I know there's some people looking at like technology even in correctional facilities, but what's the long-term impact of that? There's so many things that we still don't know. I guess that's the benefit, is that we could keep going and going and going and still maybe get 25-30% under what we know.
So, Taylor, after leaving the great state of Alabama, Roll Tide, where you were an instructor after completing your master's, and you went to the University of South Florida to do your doctorate.
I did.
How in the world did you go from studying, I believe it was marijuana incarceration for your master's thesis, to studying cyber and digital forensics?
That's a great question. Great question. I would love to circle back to the drug research world, but that just hasn't been a reality. No, I really was. I was really honed in on how does our relationship with drug use and drug legislation affect our perceptions of police, right? And how is it that, because the one theme of my undergrad, which maybe different from yours, was stoners hate cops, right? Like, there was a very obvious disconnect between the people who regularly smoked weed and those that didn't, and how they felt about cops. And that became very evident, right? And so I wanted to understand that. But then when I got to USF, I started working with George Burris. And Burris really opened my eyes to say, there are so many challenging things in cyber that there's always something to learn. And that really got me hooked, because I was like, okay, I love computers, I love tech, but I didn't have a reason to understand them in the context of crim. And then he was like, you could do both. I was like, yeah, I could, And so that's really how I got there. But I just became really aware of this need for law enforcement who were educated and aware of what tech was doing. And I think that's really where I honed in on. But I would also kind of double down on that as a theme that's become very important to me, is education for younger people and getting tech in the hands of people that need it, but making sure that they know how to be responsible for it. And so I think as I've kind of come up through this cyber world, my thought has always been, how can we use this tech to our advantage without undermining other people's experiences with it? Because generative AI may be great for me as a coder, a programmer, and I can just tippity type all the way out and it's done, right? But that same generative AI tool is being used to make deepfake content of my friend. And that's where I really became aware of, and I think AI is only made it even more aware, made me more aware, but that we can't just have this unrestricted use of technology without both pro-social and anti-social outcomes. And that, I think, cyber became that way of recognizing, here's a world where you're always going to have something to learn. There's always going to be something that's challenging, right? I've become more of a programmer than I ever thought I would be, right? Not to say that I am by any means, but, that challenge, I think, really is what hooked me and really said, like, hey, you can always be learning something new. You can always take it a different direction. And kind of to my comment earlier, cyber, from my understanding, was really just kind of the JECTEF stuff, right? Like
the Joint Electronic Crimes Task Force.
Yes, of course.
University of Alabama.
But that's a really great example of you were already working in that sphere while I was there and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I kind of understood it. I remember one day, I don't think it was you, but it was somebody in that darknet project that students were working on it in an office and they needed an adult in the room. And I was an instructor at the time, but I was 24 years old, right? So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll watch these kids for you, you know? And then I'm sitting there learning about the darknet from these, undergrads. And I'm like, so you just... oh, okay, that's meth. Okay. Yeah. I was like looking over their shoulder and so I just really had this awareness of there's this whole other world that I don't know about and I want to learn about it. And so
that's awesome.
That's how I got here.
It's a fun place to move into.
Yeah.
Essentially, like after you've already done work in systems related research, which I personally find so boring. All my sentencing friends would hate me, but you're doing great work, pals.
Yeah.
Love
Someone's
you.
got to do it.
Doing great. Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
To then go into like straight up digital forensics. That was one of your first moves, right? You got a certificate, I believe, in digital forensics, which is really jumping into the technical deep end of cyber.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I learned how to work with binary code for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, I think that experience, and if anyone has ever wondered about how computers work, I would highly suggest you take a digital forensics course or a webinar or watch a video on YouTube, because you have to understand the nitty gritty. And I think that's where there is this hesitation to give it to law enforcement and say, here, go do this thing, because you have to understand it at that level. And that experience really put me in that mindset of, cops aren't going to get this. And I'm not saying they're not going to understand it, but they're not going to receive this education. They're not going to be taught this. And so coming here and seeing what the center was, really kind of blossoming, starting, beginning, whatever you want to call it, right when I got here.
Yeah.
And we were able to immediately put that to use. And I thought that was a really, really good way to tie these things together, because at the end of the day, I think we can all agree, we got into this because we want to help. We want to fix things. We want to make things better, right? We wouldn't study crime if we didn't want it to go away to some extent, right? And so I think that experience really just showed me there's so much work to be done.
Yeah.
And it's a place where you could always be thinking about the next step.
For sure. And I think if there are any students out there listening to this, or people who work with students, right? I think there's a lot of anxiety about, quote, missing the boat in terms of picking what you want your field and your direction to be. When we were at Alabama, we had digital forensics class in undergrad. Taylor didn't take that class because you weren't interested in it at that point.
Yep.
Right? And so even if there's like these perfectly tailored programs that you just didn't know you wanted to do yet, you can still make the move later on.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's just about, I think, making that clear to the people you're working with around you and finding the best avenue to do it. Because, I took digital forensics and you do more DM stuff than I do.
Yeah, we really flip-flop.
We really have got it. Yeah.
It works nicely, though.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this brings us to, how did you come up, Miss
Mine's
Rachel?
the most boring answer, unfortunately.
No.
I mean, going into undergrad, I knew I wanted to do criminal justice.
For sure.
Because I liked watching crime procedurals.
I'll admit, Criminal Minds did it for
Yeah,
me.
100%.
We all got into it.
Luckily, I was sharp enough to quickly catch on to the fact that that's not how the FBI works, or law enforcement generally. So I kind of got more interested in, what's happening out there, as opposed to the procedural parts of attending to it. And actually, Dr. Kate Siegfried-Speller was one of my undergraduate professors. She's our colleague here now at Michigan State. And she taught, I cannot remember the name of the class, but basically introduced us to the ecosystem that is essentially like CSAM online and that as a problem. And I was like, wow, there's a lot out there that people really don't want to touch or deal with. And obviously I didn't continue to pursue that topic specifically because I knew myself well enough that I don't think I could handle working in that area. But it kind of pointed me in the direction. I was like, cool, I'll just keep doing this criminal justice thing with cyber. Not a lot of people were doing it. So I got to be, you know, kind of a unique fish in a small pond. Went to Penn State, was a unique fish in a bigger pond because no one was doing it there either. And honestly, it was a little bit strategic because I knew that it would be good timing to be coming into the field studying that. And it worked out because I work here somehow with you guys. So the timing, it's all coming together.
Right. So if you had to identify like a central theme of what you want your career to look like how would you take, because I know what you work on, but I wonder how you would put it into words.
I have just recently come around to the idea that I, as a researcher, can even have conclusions that are useful for practice. Right? I always thought of myself very much as kind of like a theoretical, like, victimologist, right? Talking to other academics. This is interesting stuff to know. But the more that I look at cybercrime and place, the more that my conclusions, I think, have felt grounded in a way that actually maybe can help shape responses and public communication about responses to cybercrime. So essentially, I think it's a lot of pieces of a bigger picture wherein there are certain places, particularly in the United States, where connectivity for the internet isn't great, right? Having access to it is pretty ubiquitous at this point, but the quality and the affordability of those vary very much. And so surely, I don't know what it is yet, but that has to have some discrete effect on how people are experiencing the internet. We know it shapes other things related to that. At the same time, we know that in rural areas in particular, law enforcement are extremely underpowered, under-budgeted, understaffed. So altogether, I think this creates a picture of we have some places in the U.S. that are extremely either at risk or undereducated about cybercrime that have the least resources to respond to it. So that's kind of what I'm trying to hone in on and maybe make some contributions somewhere.
I think it's a very actionable area because we talk about this all the time, and I love your take, but it's hard to get past that imposter syndrome of like, no, I'm not here to just write papers.
Like, who am I? What am I going to tell you?
Like, why should they listen to me? You know? And so the first couple papers I published, I felt like, well, I did it, and I think your work has really exemplified, like, junior faculty have these big ideas that don't always get put on paper quickly. But this is an area that you have really found your niche in, and I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'd set it to the side after my dissertation because it felt too big. There were fundamental problems with how I had, tried to approach it. I didn't know how to fix them. I was like, okay, maybe this is like a later thing. And then actually the police training is really what's kind of, rejuvenated it for me. But it's really been a process because my first, I would say, like, manuscript I wrote as a graduate student was actually trying to undermine the use of routine activity for cybercrime by the argument that we were measuring them in the wrong way. So not just proving a theory. I wasn't that full of myself, but
could you imagine?
I just came in.
Hi, I'm Rachel.
I just came in with a dream and a keyboard, and I was like, "You're all wrong."
Hey, Ruth Kornhauser did it, and so can you.
That paper did not get published, by the way, and it was my only endeavor into purely theoretical work, and I'm happy to have moved away from it, to be honest. So yeah,
funny.
Yeah.
Well, we're a well-rounded crew, aren't we?
I know. I love it.
Yeah.
If we had to wrap up, I guess, or did you want to add something?
No, I'm curious to hear what do you want to do next?
Yeah, I think my big focus for what I would do with this podcast moving forward is I'd like to really bring in more practitioners. I think we've talked about that over and over, but I think really, particularly in the area of prosecution, right? Prosecutors and the people that work in those offices would be a really great resource for us to understand the reality of we talk about digital evidence, we talk about how officers should have the capacity to do certain things, but we really don't talk about or have an idea of how that evidence is being used in the court process, what kind of evidence kind of standards are being influenced or being enforced, right? Those are the things that we really don't have a great idea of. And I think a prosecutor or somebody in that kind of general area would be a really great resource for us to get an idea of and probably spawn some ideas, because I think there's a lot of work to be done there.
No, 100%. I want to keep doing what we're doing, which is such a lame answer, but we still have so many people that we haven't gotten the chance to talk to yet. And I think it's just constantly helping build out this kind of overall picture of what's going on. I don't find ever that I come away from different people coming on and feeling like there's competing perspectives.
Yeah.
It's all just additional to build out what we know and how we think about it.
Yeah.
I think the practitioner perspective is particularly important. And then I think folks who live more in the cybersecurity realm would be interesting to talk to, because there's a lot of, I think, maybe stereotypical conversation about the two parties not being able to talk to each other as far as behavioralists or behavioral researchers and hard, straight up computer science tech people. So I think that could be really interesting, because ultimately that's where a lot of the prevention lies, but we're not speaking the same language. So I have to assume there's some links that we all are just not making.
Yeah.
So what about you, Timothy?
I like all of those ideas. I do agree. I like the idea of just doing what we're doing, because it really is fun.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. It would be good to get more law enforcement, prosecutors, anyone in the practitioner space, the cybersecurity side of things, the academic side of cybersecurity. I also want to try to get some guests in who are more on the cyber adjacent side of things. So whether it's gaming, whether it's counterfeiting, there's a lot of different areas where technology is a part of, but not, say, the entire focus of. And it might be helpful for us to use that to get some better insights. And well, we talk about cybercrime, but we don't talk about this particular issue all that much. We don't talk about this angle that much. So it might be fun just to get some other folks' opinions and perspectives into.
I think that would be cool. Yeah.
Well, this was fun. I'm glad we did
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
This is fun.
And thanks to everybody who's been listening. Thanks to all of our subscribers, all of the packets that are crossing the firewall. We appreciate you all. Please keep liking and subscribing. Please do so that way you're aware of who we're talking to next and what's going to be on the horizon for us. We're glad you were with us for this first year, and it's going to be great to see what the next year brings us. So please hang in there with us. And, you can always get us via email. If you want to be a guest, why not? Let us know. Worst thing that happens is we at least connect with some of you all. So feel free to hit us up on Instagram or email, or, as they say, smash that like and subscribe button so we can keep in touch with everybody. And we look forward to having you with us the next time we cross the firewall.
Thanks for listening to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. This is a production of the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University, produced by J.J. Thomas. The thoughts and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and the guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the university. If you have a comment or a question about the show, please email us at crossingthefirewall@gmail.com. Also, make sure that you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for more information. And if you're enjoying us on your favorite podcast app, please make sure that you like the show and leave us a review so that way everybody knows what we're up to. And if you're listening in on YouTube, make sure that you like us and subscribe so that way you're staying up to date on everything that is crossing the firewall.